Welcome, everyone. Happy Wednesday. And thank you for taking valuable time out of your day to learn more about the VA loan, probably the most misunderstood loan product out there in the mortgage world. If you have worked with me in the past, you know one of my most popular sayings is mortgages do not operate with common sense because it is riddled with government and banking regulations, and those institutions, they're not known for their common sense. The VA happens to use a little bit more common sense underwriting than most loan programs out there. And a lot of people just get confused on it because it isn't like your normal traditional Fannie and Freddie mortgages out there. And a lot of people of the past, including myself, used to think, oh, VA loans, those are so complicated. And then it wasn't until about 2018, I had a friend of mine that was VA eligible and said, John, you're doing my VA loan. I said, let me refer you out to someone's like, no, you're doing it. And I couldn't get him approved conventional, but I could get him approved VA. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. That's not what people told me about VA loans. And it was there that put me down a rabbit hole of trying to find out more, and where I found something called the Military Mortgage Boot Camp run by the one and only Michael Fischer. And I started watching all of his videos on the VA loan, and then reached out to him and became friends with him. And next thing you know, I made it a mission to get better at VA loans. And now, like all of a sudden in 2021, VA loans were 30% of my business. Prior to that was maybe a combined 5% from 2018 to 2020. And then, sorry, I just had a Teams message that threw me off here. I didn't realize Teams could come in, even though I turned it off. But then now in 2023, here it is, almost 50% of my business and 100% of the passion that I want to get known for. So let's go here into this presentation here. Is me and my family. So just quick things. My background's in finance as a financial planner. The Military Mortgage Boot Camp has rebranded into the Veteran Mortgage Advisors. And for all the realtors that are on this now, one exciting thing that's coming out sometime in 2023 will be the Veteran Housing Advisor, where we will put out a program to train realtors specifically to get designations, to show the general public that you are committed to the VAs. One thing about my company is that the VA stuff is all done in-house. We're one of the lenders that has that delegated authority to underwrite without having to send loans to the VA there to make things go quicker. And that's me and my family here. I have 4 kids under the age of 6. So when you're thinking about having your client go through Veterans United or some of the other big box lenders, you can just think, hey, let me use John, because that money could go to a daycare for him and his brood of children. But our VA mission is we want to help veterans own a piece of the land that they fought to protect. So every VA buyer, applicant that applies with us, we go through every avenue to make sure that we can do our best to get them approved. Mike, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I have a brood of children as well. I should probably put a picture of my brood of children in the background there, right, to make me seem more endearing. But, here's me pretending that I run the world, standing in front of a fountain on a rooftop in Dallas. I used to run Military Mortgage Boot Camp. We evolved that into the Veteran Mortgage Advisor Program, as John said. So today, that's our mission, is really to help you as much as we can learn more about the conversations and learn more about what you need to know to stand out as somebody who understands the VA product, the VA home loan benefit. I myself write loans for a living, run a small branch and a team, but I also network with loan officers all over the country in a group that I created, a community of loan officers called the Mortgage Loan Officer Network, over 12,000 folks strong. We're just doing our best to learn, to be better, and to bring things back to the real estate community that are of value for our veteran customers. So that is our mission. We want to educate the real estate lending and veteran communities to serve and protect military homeowners and encourage wealth building. And this is part of what John and I are going to talk about in a special manner today. Want to make sure you understand the VA loan is one of the best ways for a veteran family to build wealth, not just enjoy homeownership, but to get ahead in life. And it's very important that we give them good advice so that they know what decisions they should be making over time to help them build equity and help build their balances in all their accounts. So,
Yes.
all right, John,
I
you
always
got a
say the
lot of
VA
love
loan is
out
the
there.
best wealth building contest. But now for all the realtors, this is supposed to be more educational, but I would be a terrible marketer and salesperson if I didn't at least put in one little sales pitch here. So these are all the red states, or the states that my team and I are licensed in. So we have a saying, wherever UPCS, we can go. And to take care of our military clients throughout the country, unless it's a white state there, but I can always just get paid to get licensed in those states. Those are the states that are the mafia that charge us to get licensed in there. But one of the things that we do for all of we're dedicated to VA. We can close loans in 21 days. It's how we got a lot of our offers accepted, especially in 2021 when cash was king and no one would accept a VA loan. I was proud of, in that 1 year, I got 50 VA purchases closed. And that was a lot of some of the stuff that we'll learn a little bit today on how to present an offer from the realtor side. I waive my lender fees. I also pay for the appraisal. And out of the last 30 months, I've closed over 500 total purchases, and my pre-approval letter has a 100% close ratio. So that's something that I'm really proud of with my team. It's me and 3 loan partners, where we just focus on every file together, and we don't issue a pre-approval letter unless we know that we can do it, because we look at ourselves as a steward of your money. So think about all the expenses you have with appraisals and, well, not with us, inspections, and risking your earnest money deposit. We don't want our buyers to waste any money on a transaction. With the Veteran Mortgage Advisor and the Howard Team Home Loans, we are trying to become the go-to VA brand. We just don't have that $1 million a month marketing budget. So we rely on teaching classes, putting boots on the ground, getting in front of real estate offices, and doing online webinars like this to spread the good word about the VA loan. 3 must ask questions for all the realtors out here and other loan officers that are on this call. Make sure that these 3 questions are part of your your buyer consultation. Is, are you and your spouse a veteran? It's important to ask that, because most of the reasons why people don't use their VA loan is because no one really asked them about it. Are you entitled to a disability from the VA? The only downside to the VA loan is that there's a funding fee involved if you don't have it, a disability rating. But if you have a 10% disability rating or more, you are waived of that VA funding fee. But the most important question, if you're a realtor on the listing side or the buyer side, when you don't have a pre-approval if you don't have the certificate of eligibility. And there's a lot of big box lenders out there that will issue pre-approval letters without pulling the certificate of eligibility, and they find out towards the end of the transaction, ooh, you don't have enough entitlement. Sorry, we can't do this loan. Talk about being heartbreaking. It's the most important piece of the transaction. And so it's important that you always ask. If you don't get anything else out of this class, remember those 3 questions when talking to people that are VA eligible. Today, we're going to unlearn some myths, like appraisals are tougher, buyers are weaker, VA loans take longer to close, sellers will net less if you accept a VA loan as opposed to conventional. Well, I teach a class on that's usually like an hour and a half long. So we're only going to spend about 10 minutes in there. So if you have questions afterwards, feel free to call me. We can set up a coffee and we'll go over those more in depth. But the most importantly here, especially that we have a handful of veterans that signed up for this class. We want you to understand that the VA loan is the most powerful loan when it comes to building wealth. You can own more than one at a time using your bonus entitlement. You can buy a multifamily with $0 down. Like if you're fresh out of the military, even when you're in the military, that's something that they should really take a look at, because you can build so much wealth and start building a real estate portfolio without a lot of money out of pocket. And then that down payment that you would have to put in on an FHA loan or a conventional loan, you can take that money and invest it in other investments to really build wealth on there, because even though interest rates seem high now, you can earn better elsewhere and make better use of your money. So these are just the 6 most common myths that because you're putting zero down, you have a weak buyer, or the VA loans are harder to underwrite. VA loans take longer to close. The sellers must pay the veterans fees. A client can only have one VA loan at a time, and VA loan appraisals are tougher. And those are all the myths that we can bust. That usually takes an hour and a half on here, but let's dive into a few of the easiest ones here. Mike, why do you think that people confuse VA buyers with FHA buyers on there?
John, that's a pretty deep question. And I think it goes back to just understanding what happens in the real estate market, in the real estate marketplace. If you think about it, most loan officers are not you, John. They close maybe 30 loans a year on a bad year, maybe 50 or 60 on a good year. And nationwide, I know that less than 10% of those are VA transactions. Well, that's for a loan officer. As a realtor, probably doing half or a third of that. So the average realtor is only running across maybe one VA transaction a year. The average loan officer is maybe doing one or two or three. So because of the lack of experience and lack of seeing the transaction, when they run across it, it seems like it's something totally new and totally different because it's just not common. So there are some moving parts and some things that are slightly different, but they're not necessarily worse or slower unless the person handling the transaction doesn't know what they're doing. And I think that's where most of the confusion comes from, is that the realtors and loan officers see a whole lot of FHA and they don't see as much VA. So they start just lumping them together because there's a couple things that are similar. So in the end of the day, you'll hear John and I all the time say, don't FHA my VA, meaning that the FHA product tends to attract borrowers that aren't as well qualified. And those borrowers tend to struggle to get through the loan process. And the FHA loan process itself is more restrictive. So when we lump the two together, we start making assumptions like this VA loan is never going to close as compared to a conventional loan, when the reality of it shows right here on this slide, as John is showing you, two buyers side by side, buyer A with a good FICO, good household income, larger average loan amount. And one thing I don't think we put on there is the assets they have after they close. Like he put median liquid assets is somewhere around 19, but median assets after closing is around 14 or 15. So that borrower in most areas would actually be a conventional borrower, but we're treating them like FHA because we're unfamiliar with the process. We think that, they're probably this borrower that doesn't have the income or doesn't have the cash to work with or doesn't have the credit score. And unfortunately, you see a lot of veterans discouraged from having their offer accepted, having to work with other loan products and being put in situations where they're not able to build as much wealth because of the misinformation and or the ignorance of our industry, of our loan officers and of our realtors. And I think it starts with the loan officers. I think us loan officers should be leading the charge on making a smooth process, just like John talked about in the beginning of this presentation, so that there isn't a misperception out there. What do you think about that, John?
I agree. I mean, and then I also think one of the biggest issues is like there's the addendum of the FHA VA addendum. So a lot of people think it is the same as both government loans on there. And I always think about like FHA, you're going to see a lot more FHA loans coming out down the pipeline in 2023 and 2024 with these new loan level pricing adjustments that are being put into effect May 1st. And so I don't want to discredit the FHA buyer too much, but you're usually an FHA buyer for a reason. Either you have a lot of debt, or you had a credit mishap, or you don't have the down payment and you don't qualify for a VA loan. So that's where the FHA loan can really come in handy to help first-time home buyers out there. But the VA buyer is just unique because if you think about a veteran, maybe they did 20 years in the military. Now they have multiple sources of income, whether it be a pension for the 20 years of service, a disability pension for being injured during their time of service, and then their civilian job outside afterwards. And so with all those different sources of income, the VA buyer is just a lot stronger buyer. And every now and then, I don't get it as much as I used to, but every now and then I'll get a listing agent say, well, it's zero down. They don't really have any skin in the game. And that is like one of our biggest pet peeves when we hear that, because like their skin in the game was serving our country, and that you have to do something to earn this loan. Serving 4 years into the military, 6 years in reserves, a lot of different ways to become eligible. You sacrifice your time, put yourself at risk, and because of that, here's a benefit to help you own a piece of the land that you fought to protect on there.
And it's like
So
nails on a chalkboard when you do that, right?
it is awful. So usually we can go a little bit deeper into this, but let's keep on time. They take longer to close. There used to be it's because there's a few of the bigger players that you probably hear, like the popular credit union or the automobile insurance company, the ones that say that they're united for you. Those are some of the big loans that they get a lot of applicants. They still dominate the market share in VA loans, and so a lot of times they do take 45 days to close. But your local lender that is that are familiar with VA loans, they all can close in 30 days or less, especially because they have that automated authority to be able to not have to send out to the VA for prior approval. And so, I mean, like for us, our average VA clear to close is less than 20 days. So even when we have 30-day contracts, we're usually clear to close in under 3 weeks on that. And so it's just, there's statistics out there. It's just not the truth.
So, John, are you average at anything you do? I mean, who would want to work with an average lender anyways? You want to work with somebody
That's
who's
what I like to
above
say. Thank you.
right?
Yes.
So, yeah, that's
above
part of the
average. I got to set
perception.
expectations. I would like to say I'm great and phenomenal, but let's set
Right.
expectations here so I can exceed them. Me
Right.
and my
Well,
team are definitely above average.
that's what we're saying is that, yes, the national average lenders don't do as many of them. They're slower than them because they don't understand the processes or how to qualify the borrowers or how to order the appraisals properly. At the end of the day, a lender that knows what they're doing can close them much faster than the national conventional loan average. So
I'm not going to go over all of these things, but the one thing about it is, like, if you ever see like a broker out there that you'll see like a 1% origination charge, or a like Navy Federal used to always have a 1% origination fee. I haven't seen it too much recently on there, but if there's ever a lender that has a 1% origination fee, then the veteran is not allowed to pay for any of the fees that are on here. But it doesn't say the seller has to. It just can't be the VA buyer on there. And so it could be the lender, it could be the realtor, but oftentimes it gets pushed on to the seller that says, oh, we can't pay for this. The most popular one that upsets a lot of different people is that no matter if there's a transaction, if there's a 1% origination fee or not, VA buyers are not allowed to pay for a real estate transaction fee. The VA says the commission is enough, which we don't make the rules, but that is the only thing that they can't do. Most brokers will waive that transaction fees, and there's some brokers that will still charge the realtor on that. And so that's something that if you're a realtor, talk to your broker on VA fees. Do you waive the transaction fee? Because the buyer's not allowed to pay it no matter what. But check the loan estimates. If you ever see a 1% origination fee, that's when things can start to get a little dicey, because the title company can't charge their settlement fee. And so they'll charge that to the seller. And then they're like, wait a second, I thought the sellers would net the same. They do, working with a lender like us that doesn't charge any of those fees on there. So then the buyer is allowed to do it. And it's actually a strength for the veteran to be able to pay for these fees, because if they weren't allowed to pay for these fees, then they would be a weaker offer to the seller. And so when we're heading into this competitive market that we're already starting to see multiple offers and guaranteeing to pay above the list price, if there's a 1% origination fee, your buyer's offer is going to be weaker. So it's important not to have that origination fee. And if there's no origination fee, then you don't have to worry about this, and the seller can net the same. So now this is one of my favorite things. This is for all the veterans on here and the realtors that want to explain to their veterans about how to build wealth. You are allowed to have one VA loan out at a time. I just had someone close this year that now has 2 VA loans that have not been paid back, that are now rentals, and used a VA loan on the third and just had to come up with the down payment. But right now, they have 3 VA loans outstanding. That's the most I've ever seen. Usually you see 2, but it's not a question of eligibility, entitlement, and qualification. So if people are in here, this can get a little tricky. So when you ask a question, send it to the panelists so you don't feel silly. But there's no dumb question except the one that's not asked, because this is not something that people are taught. So there's a difference between eligibility, entitlement, and qualifying. So here is the wealth building takeaway number 1. This is someone that we just pulled their entitlement yesterday. And he has a VA loan that he took out in 2021 that he now wants to rent out on here. And so now, because he's at a 2.25 interest rate on this home, that's going to be one of the best wealth building rentals. Like, can you imagine being locked in at a 2.25 interest rate? Never let that thing go. That mortgage is, I would argue, more valuable than the property itself, because now that cash flow, that principal and interest is locked in forever. And then the rental prices, especially here in the Tampa Bay area, continue to rise every year, usually about a 6% average on that. And so they can now get the tenant to pay down their mortgage while they go out and they're moving into their step up home as their family grows. And so if everyone can pull out their phone, I used to always love doing this calculation on a bar napkin because it makes me look really smart, but it's really easy on here because there's a lot of worksheets, but here's how the math works. So a 726, like, you take the conforming loan limit in here. And so right now here, especially in Hillsborough County, is 726,200. So if you can see that 726,200, we're going to divide that by 4. Why? That's just the formula. So we have 181,550. We're going to subtract that 45,000. That leaves us with an remaining entitlement of 136,550. We multiply that number by 4, and that's 546,200. So our buyer can go out there and buy a $545,000 house and not have to put a down payment on the next house. They can have acquire 2 properties with 0 down payment and turn one of those into a rental. But wait a second. Let's say we have a little bit more expensive taste. Things have really changed. We've got a lot of raises. I'm married now with 4 kids. I got to get a house that fits my needs. Maybe I need a $750,000 house here. So we take that $750,000 number, we subtract that 546,200, and now that's $203,000 in there. How many people think that the veteran here has to put up the $203,800? Because I see that a lot in the Facebook groups. Really, you only have to come up with 25% on that. So if this person wanted to buy a $750,000 house, remember, they bought this house for $180,000 and now they're going to rent it out, and he's going to get $1,800 a month in rent on that one property in there, a nice little 2-1 in downtown. And they can go buy a $750,000 house with a minimum down payment of $50,000. Or they can go buy that $540,000 house with $0 down. And so that's something that becomes one of the greatest wealth building tools, because maybe they feel a little uncomfortable right now going in and buying a $750,000 house and getting that payment. But think about that net cash flow that they're making now on that rental that could help subsidize their forever house on there. Or if we think that if the experts are correct and we're in this inflated interest rate environment, you can always do an interest rate reduction refinance loan to lower that monthly payment on this forever home and get to a payment that they feel more comfortable at. So I know that was a lot of numbers here. So who has any questions? I want to check in here on if anyone has any questions. And Mike, if you want anything to add to that.
Yeah, John, I think the challenge there is that sometimes folks leaving the house behind just don't understand what the current market rent is. And they get worried about having 2 mortgages at a time because they've never been landlords before. So, working with a quality real estate professional that can talk to them about management companies, about what kind of things go into owning an investment or rental property, helping them calculate what the tax differences might be, what insurance differences might be, and what extra expenses they might have to carry and or labor and maintenance they might have to address are super important as they make those decisions. So, being in that position of being an advisor is so critical, and not only from the perspective of helping them build wealth, but for the realtors that are watching. I always hear the realtors talking about trying to find more customers and more business and trying to work with more veterans. At the end of the day, the current folks you're working with are your best connections and or referral sources when you serve them from the position of just giving them everything that they need as an advisor. So, sometimes the information that they need is not necessarily related to the sale of one house. It might be related to something where, as a realtor, you're not going to get paid. Giving somebody advice on how to manage a rental isn't going to pay you like selling the house will, but giving them the best information and allowing them to make an informed choice positions you and puts you above so many other people in the industry who would just walk in the door and say, hey, you should sell this house. By going down the path of showing them the numbers, helping them crunch what the cash flow will be over time, at the end of the day, they will be your best referral source and best friend, most likely, for many years to come. So learning some of those skills, if you haven't done it yet, if you haven't worked with rentals, find a realtor in your market that does a lot of them. Find realtors that, and I know plenty in my market that do, but I also know there's realtors that don't. So those are skills you might need to work on a little bit as you get into the space of learning how to help the veterans build wealth by owning multiple houses. Make sense, John?
Yeah, and then I know one of the realtors that's on this call right now. We've worked on over 20 VA purchases together over the years. Renee Thompson with Spartan Group Realty, and what's awesome is that we have had many scenarios just like this, where we have helped buy, then rent out where she can help property manage, and then go buy the step up house. And one of the coolest transactions is they bought a house 7 miles away. Now, a lot of people thought, wait a second, I thought you had to be 100 miles away to get another government loan. And that's why we say, don't FHA
my VA.
my VA. That is an FHA rule. The VA does not have that rule because the VA is the one loan program that uses the most common sense out there, that they know that life has a way of changing. You bought a house, you outgrew it, but you love the area. You don't want your kids to get out of the school system. And what was really neat on that transaction is that we didn't yet have a lease, but we needed the rent to offset the payment to qualify. The VA loan is the only loan that I know of that all the veteran needed to do was write a letter saying that they intend to rent out their house and that we could negate that payment on their departing residents, which I didn't know you could do that until I got my hands dirty and got myself into the loan. And now I want to scream it from the mountaintops that you don't have to be within over 100 miles away, and you don't really need a lease to offset the departing resident's payment, which is amazing, especially if you think about it. And the reason why that rule was made is because what if you get orders to PCS unexpectedly and you're going to move across the country from Tampa to Colorado Springs? Well, you might not be able to rent that out right away. But if the rental market's strong in Tampa, which it is, you just say you need to do it, then you use your bonus entitlement to buy a house in Colorado to get settled in. So that's why they use a little bit more common sense, because the military is known for moving people around, sometimes unexpectedly. And so veterans that are out of the military that are in their civilian life now, they can use these rules to their advantage to build wealth on that. I got a chat. Oh, thank you, Renee. I don't know if anyone can see that, but she says, I believe in you guys so much. That's why I bought my own home with you. Thank you, Renee. I didn't pay her to say that, but I probably should. I'm going to take you out to lunch after this, Renee.
So, John, there's a question from the question box too. I can take it, or you can take it.
Oh, let me see. I got to go. My fat fingers. Okay, does everyone see it? So how, Mike? I'll answer the question. I'll ask the question. You answer. So, how does it work to restore entitlement when trying to build an investment portfolio using VA loans? For example, I buy my first primary using the VA and I convert that to a rental. Can I refi that property to conventional to restore my full entitlement to buy the next property? Is that something that can be repeated multiple times? And so that's called a one-time restoration of entitlement. The answer is yes, but Mike explained it. Go, Mike. I'm sorry. Go.
Pick me. Let me answer, boss. All
Michael
right.
Fischer.
This is a fantastic question. I almost feel like this anonymous attendee is from the VA Regional Loan Center and is testing John and I on our skills. So, yes, when you refinance a property that had a previous VA loan on it, the main challenge that you end up with is that the occupancy declaration of the property has to be consistent. It has to make sense. So, in the example that John gave, someone bought a house, they lived in it for a while as a primary residence. Totally makes sense. Their family got bigger. They bought another house. Cool. They now want a rental and they have a primary residence they use the VA loan with. That all makes sense. So just keep in mind, VA loan is always primary residence. Now, that other house that they retain, if they refinance it, they would be refinancing it, as this question asker noted, to a conventional mortgage. So the VA entitlement would be tied up in that particular property. So if the VA entitlement is released because of the conventional refi, in theory, you could restore it. And John showed you an example of a certificate of eligibility before. It lists the VA loans on there. That loan would still be listed until it was restored. Now, the trick on this one is that even though the VA allows the restoration, the VA does not allow you to build a portfolio of investment properties using this type of method. They would only allow you to restore one time. They call it one-time restoration. So if you went back and restored that, you would see on the certificate of eligibility, the next time around, there would be a note that would have that property address on it. And it would say the entitlement's been restored for one time, but you could not go back and restore on subsequent properties. So yes, you could potentially use that entitlement to buy another property, but you'd get stuck after one restoration and not be able to do that unless you went back and started selling these properties. If you went back and got rid of all your VA finance properties and then wanted to restore, you could do it at that point. But the VA is very clear on this. And so, yes, you can build wealth in rental property, quote unquote, portfolio by planning a few years in advance, but you can't use it over and over and over to buy 30 houses. Does that make sense?
I did have that scenario, and we did have one that went in, refinanced it into a conventional loan, bought another one, and then we decided they decided to sell that property, and then we needed to restore that entitlement, so they could buy a $2.2 million loan at 100% financing. So it made sense because they already used their one-time restoration on that property to sell the other VA loan, restore the eligibility and entitlement, and then was able to buy 100% financed on there.
They had already used the one time, but the other property, like you said, John, they didn't refinance it. They got rid of it. They disposed of it. They sold it.
Because it's all based, like if your name is still on the deed on there, that's how they look at it on it. So even though you restored it to a conventional loan, if your name is still on the deed, you can do that one time. All right. So realtors that are here and veterans, if you have a basic allowance for housing, I would argue that it would be silly not to own a house on here, especially knowing what we know now, that you can then turn this home into a rental if you were to PCS out elsewhere. And so what we did was, and there's like, you can Google BAH calculator. There's like the first 10 sites, they all kind of work on there, where you can put in what your rank is and if you have dependents or not, and it will let in the zip code, and it will let you know what your BAH is. So here in Hillsborough County is $2,500 a month. So in addition to their base wages, they also get a basic allowance for housing to be able to go and buy something off base for their family. And so what we went and looked at was that on about $2,500 a month, like, so if you can go up to, if you can extend it, because there's so many of my active duty buyers that want keep their payment at or below their BAH. And sometimes we can push it a little bit higher. So on this one was a $350,000 house. It's about $2,500 a month all in. 2626 was the one that we looked at. And are you better off buying that house and then selling it in 5 years? Or are you better off renting the property? And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to look at some pretty conservative estimates. So you can't say that we cherry picked these numbers on here. And so the annual rental increase is a little bit higher, especially in Hillsborough County, than 6% annual, but we just only went with 6%. And then the appreciation of the homes, we went with 3.5%, even though the appreciation in Hillsborough County is way more in the last 10 years. But we say, past performance is not indicative of future performance. That's the old financial planner in me. But we wanted to see, are we in a better position 5 years from now if you get the call that you need to leave MacDill and head over to Colorado Springs, Colorado for your next duty station? So Mike, do you want to go in here a little bit more?
Yeah. So this particular example, we just picked 2,500. We know the BAH is variable based on zip code, based on rank, based on housing size, but we picked a number out of a hat for somebody that might be a E3, might have a few children and a family, and you work backwards. If you've got $2,500, the taxes and insurance are going to be a good size factor as to how much house you could buy and keep your payment in that range. And that's part of the reason you need to talk to a qualified veteran mortgage advisor like John Howard in advance. But if you get that sorted out and you have a good concept of how much might be coming in, this particular example, we're showing you, yes, you're a little bit behind in year one. So if you think there's a good chance that you're going to change stations in year one, you do not want to own a rental, that might be a case where you don't want to buy. But if you're holding pretty much up till the end of year two, you're breaking even. And I would add that this particular example, we only use what, John, 3% appreciation in the real estate market. We used a pretty
3.52.
Yeah. So 3% historically is really conservative. More accurate number would be closer to 1 or 2% over inflation. So ultimately, a 4 or 5% number is probably more accurate. But we went with a real conservative number. By the end of year two, you're breaking even. Year three, you're slightly ahead. Year 4, 5, 6, 7, it just multiplies and it gets
because
better.
What you're doing is not only is your home increasing, but you're paying down your mortgage. Yep. And you're increasing that equity. So you're doing both in your favor. Whereas in rent, I don't know how many people hear of rent, but does your rent usually stay the same year after year? No, especially now. It's like, hey, we're jacking up rent $1,000 a month because we can. It's like, oh my God, how do I do that? So there's so many of our purchases in the last year is like my landlord's increasing my rent from $2,000 a month to $3,000 a month. I might as well buy if I had to go pay $3,000 a month, right? We've had so many of those buyers in the last 12 to 18 months. And so here is was a shocking statistic is that only 19% of active duty service members have used their VA loan while being active. And to me, that is crazy because in addition to your base pay, the VA is giving you money to pay rent or a mortgage. You might as well buy a mortgage, especially if you want to be a landlord in the future.
Because let's look at it from the wealth building perspective, John. That payment that they make every month is essentially forced savings. You're forcing yourself to pay down that debt, $200, $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 a month going towards principal, depending on your loan size, right? So you're building not just equity, but you're paying down a debt as well, so that you have wealth to work with if you decide that you want to cash it out.
And then we can, like this calculator, we can get more in depth. Like if you are self-employed or like you are a high net earner that itemizes their deduction, and you have the mortgage interest deduction, and you have all these kind of things. But it really more times than not, and this is a great way for active duty service members here on this call. If you're getting like let's go see how much home you can buy based off of your BAH. And then in 5 years, you should be in a really good position on there.
Now, I want to throw one thing out there, John. Anyone that bought it in the last 3 years was pretty much even after year one. because of how little demand, or how little supply was in the marketplace and how much demand, and that supply and demand imbalance is predicted to continue for quite a while. So,
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean that's a whole nother hour-long call on our supply issues and what's driving and propping up real estate values on there. But we don't see real estate values going down anytime soon, and it's because of basic demographics of we have our largest first-time home buyer demographic coming in, but there's no homes to buy. Then you have increased competition where you have all these hedge funds buying single-family homes as rentals on there. And so we're trying to push as many people to buy as possible, because I really like, one of the reasons why I left the financial planning world is because when I looked and see the people that could retire versus the people that couldn't retire at age 60, the people that had one or two rental properties at age 60 and had that passive income were able to retire with dignity. And a lot of people did not, that didn't have that. They're hoping on Social Security and a little bit of 401k savings. And so that was something that was an aha moment of, hey, instead of having my clients put money in Roth IRAs and 401ks, let's get them to buy homes and start building real estate portfolios to be able to retire later in life. I think if I could go back in time, I would, be a little bit braver and join the military, and would have got out. And my first home, I would have bought a fourplex, ideally. And if you were to buy a quadplex, you go out and you live in one of the units. And the next thing you know, you're a landlord to three of your neighbors that are collecting, where you can use their money to pay basically your portion of it, where you can live basically rent free for a year using other people's money. And then after a year, move out with your spouse, use your bonus entitlement to get a home where you feel more comfortable raising a family in, and rent out that fourth door. And now you have four doors collecting income while that quadplex is increasing in value, and you have four other people paying down your mortgage, building wealth that you can one day sell and cash out, or keep it forever and collect mailbox money on there. And to me, what's so crazy, again, going back to the previous example, my one takeaway I forgot to give to our realtors is that a brain fart. Active duty service members, if you like, once they have 90 days of service, they are eligible to buy a home. Most other buyers, you need a 2-year history and 3 years looking forward. Not on VA. If you're active duty, you have the most stable income in America. And so that's why it's so much easier to qualify on that. So newly members of the armed forces, let's start doing seminars to them and teaching them to use that money that the VA is giving them to start becoming building that real estate portfolio. So I don't know where you can get a quadplex for $2,500 a month. And so often, sometimes you might need the other 3 rents to qualify, and you can do that. But there are some stipulations to it. And this gets people caught up sometimes, where after closing and all the closing costs, if you're using the other 3 rents to qualify, or if it's a duplex and you're using the other one, or if it's a triplex, the other 2, you need to have at least 6 months of mortgage payments in reserves after all of the closing costs in order to be able to use that rental income to help you qualify. That I've gotten some, hey, John, can you save this deal type calls? And it's like, unfortunately, the big box lenders set you up for failure, because they should know that you need to have 6 months after closing costs. Now, one of the other ones is the borrower has a reasonable likelihood of success as a landlord. And so how do you prove that? Usually you have a history of it. But what's kind of neat is, if some of the realtors are on the call, if you also have a property management business, they can hire you as a property management, where you are the one that is going to help property manage property. And now you have a reasonable likelihood of success. And realtors have a property management client on there. What questions do you guys have for this? Because I think this one right here is probably the biggest wealth takeaway for veteran buyers and active duty service members and realtors to go out there and sing this from the mountaintops. Because if you're a veteran and you might not have the 6 months of reserves, but you have good income and you don't need it to qualify, you don't need those 6 months of reserves because you can qualify for the entire payment on your own on that. Do we have any questions on this one? Because this is the one that, again, if I go back in time, this is what
I'm going to throw a
do,
question
and what
out.
I try to talk to all my military friends about.
I'm going to throw a question out that a lot of folks ask me when they're looking to buy the multi-unit. And it's that on that multi-unit, John, how do they figure out what the rent will be and like how much they'll actually get on those other units?
Well, if there's existing leases, sometimes you can use that, but oftentimes it's based off the appraisal on what the appraiser deems to be fair market rent.
So they do like a rent analysis, just like they do comparable homes analysis to figure out what the market rents are in that area, right?
Yes.
Yep. And just remember in that multi-unit, you're going to live in one of the units because VA loans are for primary. So it'd be a little bit easier, but your tenants are going to be right next door. So you gotta think of that up front. So hopefully maybe
also
you
too, if you need to collect some checks, you know where to go.
Right.
Yeah,
well, that's why we are suggesting folks do it while they're serving, because you can go back to your unit and see if folks who are currently renting want to live with you instead in one of those units. Just a unique time frame where you have people that you're connected with at a personal level that might actually be living in one of your units as well. And you already, in theory, know, like, and trust them. So, again, a good opportunity to get started. I know a lot of folks that are active duty that have bought multi-units in and around the bases they were serving at have gone out of their way to rent mostly to people that were serving on base, and use the base resources to find other people to rent when they retire from service. So
all right, we got 10 minutes left. This is one of the things that I always hear the most. So I just actually got a call right now. After I get off this call, I'm calling a listing agent to advocate on behalf of one of my buyers that is a VA buyer that's put in an offer. And I know what they're going to say. Well, we got like 2 offers right now. And, VA appraisals, they're a lot tougher. I just don't want them, they're really picky about the property. And they always come in low, right? I hear that almost every day. I will argue that the VA appraisal process is the best process because it's the same appraisers that also do conventional loans. They just happen to be certified from the VA, and they have to take extra training. So it's your better appraisers in the county that are on the VA appraisal panel. And they're also held to a standard of when they need to turn in the appraisal from the time that it's ordered to the time that the lender has it in their hands is oftentimes much faster than the conventional appraisal. And that conventional appraisal is not held to a standard. You're just at the mercy of that appraiser caring about timelines. And so if a conventional or an FHA appraiser gives us a value on the home, oftentimes we're stuck with it. And the buyer can then cancel and go to another lender to hopefully in turns get a higher appraisal. But you don't have to do that on VA. And also, too, on the VA, the appraisal sticks with the veteran in the property for 6 months. It does not stick with the property if that veteran was to cancel and you go out and you get a new VA buyer, you can get a brand new appraisal. You don't have to wait 6 months like you do with FHA. But the coolest thing about the VA appraisal is that they have the Tidewater process and the reconsideration of value. So the Tidewater, what happens is that the appraiser says, hey, John and Mike, I get that you want this. You think this home is worth $390,000. I can't justify this value. Can you please send me some comps that I may have missed? Now in Tidewater, we are purposely in the dark on what the value would be. But it is kind of nice to know that we're preparing everybody now that, hey, the value is going to come in low. Let's go back and let's double and triple check what are our best comps to justify this value. And sometimes you can kind of add in a little bit of a love letter saying that, hey, this was a multiple offer property. We were 1 of 12. We had to go here. This really is what the market is right now. This is the only home that fits our family in the school zone. Sometimes you can tug on those appraisers' heartstrings, but more times during Tidewater is more based off the science of the appraisal on it. So the Tidewater process is usually you have 48 hours to turn in 3 comps. And I found out that if you submit 6, they only look at the first 3. And so get your 3 best comps. And now the appraiser can say, hey, these comps do support the purchase price. Thank you. Or maybe you didn't receive any comps. You didn't send any in because the listing agent's like, whatever, I don't care. The veteran agreed to pay above the appraised value. This is not my job on there. And then the buyer's agent's like, I don't really know. It probably isn't worth 390, but let's hope here's 3 bigger comps on that. And then the appraiser then issues the final value on it. And a lot of times people say, oh, shoot, this came in at $376,000. I'm sorry, buyer, you got to come up with that extra $14,000. I really thought it was going to come in at 390. The listing agent's not coming down. The seller's not coming down to the appraised value. What do you want to do? Well, what I do and my team does is we do the reconsideration of value every time. And sometimes it does take like it's usually about a 4 business day turn time. And a lot of times you can find out ahead of time how much it is. So hopefully that's why we order the appraisal early on in the process to see. So that way we have time to go through the Tidewater and the reconsideration of value. But basically we then go in and the letter has to be in writing from the veteran to say why they decided how they justified the value. And statistics show, Mike, how often does the VA increase the value of the property during the reconsideration of value process?
About 2/3 of the time, a little over 70%.
Yep.
So
I've heard 66, I've heard 70, I've heard 80. So I usually, as a salesman to me, I go with 80%.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. 80% of the time it works, 100% of the time.
There you go. So the biggest challenge in the reconsideration of value, and this is we didn't put this on there because it's kind of the scary number and it's not fun to talk about. But at the end of the day, when you talk to the VA about reconsiderations of value, they actually track how many appraisals come in below the purchase contract nationwide pretty much every year. And when you talk to them at the lenders conferences and call them and all that, they'll tell you, man, we hear these lenders complaining all the time about appraised values and about how bad VA is, but our appraisals come in at value compared to conventional at an identical percentage, about 87% to 90% of the time. And also, we have this process for people to work with us and to fight to get higher value. But man, only like 0.2 to 0.4% of the appraisals that come in low are even submitted to the VA. So like we said in the beginning of the call, huge lack of knowledge by the real estate and lending industry, mostly the lenders, for taking the lead on getting a reconsideration of value put together and submitted, because there's this huge opportunity to win and to get a higher value. And on 200 transactions, only one of us are actually even trying to use the VA's process to get a higher value. It's sad. It really is frustrating.
That is the biggest issue. That's why when I teach these classes, I encourage other loan officers that are technically my competition, come here, learn about this stuff, because we got to better serve the veterans in our industry. Because I think before I took the military mortgage boot camp and who we, and then veteran mortgage advisor, I didn't really know about the reconsideration of value. The process looks intimidating when you look at the form. You're like, God, is the VA really going to do this? Yes. The regional loan center is your friend. They want to put veterans in homes. They fight for it. And here last week, actually less than a week ago, is a real life example where we went and we did this reconsideration of value. Now, there's no such thing as rushes, but the answer is always no unless you ask. So this reconsideration of value was due back after the original close date. So I just called the VA and I said, hey, this is the situation. Is there any way that you can maybe get to this today or tomorrow? And they did it for me. And not only did they do it for me, we got the desired effect of going from that 376,000 to that $390,000 and save that veteran $14,000 that they were contractually obligated to come up with at closing. Now they have $14,000 to make that house a home, pay off debt, do whatever they want to do, because they don't have to give that to the seller anymore because of this reconsideration of value. So for the realtors on here, for the loan officers, if you have ever in this situation, I can help you through this process on it, even if it's not a loan that I'm actively working on, because I want to demystify that working with the VA is difficult. Maybe the VA on the medical side, but the VA on the lending side, they are extremely realtor, lender, buyer friendly on here. Now, I got a couple minutes. I want to power through this. The minimum property requirements, I hear this all the time, like, oh God, they're really picky. All the VA really cares about is it's safe, sound, and sanitary. And if all of a sudden they come up with something that is a little silly, like maybe a bathroom fan is not operational, like I had on one, I'm like, really? You know what? You can write that letter, explain why you don't think it's a big deal. The veteran signs off on it, and then the VA can say, yes, we agree with you. So the VA is the only program where you can go above the appraiser's head and get things waived, like mandatory inspections or mandatory property requirements, like the bathroom fan that I had. Some things that are always like, there's nothing you can do about it type of things is if you have chip paint, you better get out there. One time Tim Perez and I got out to a home on the weekend and we scraped some paint because no one else would want it to. And we put on 2 layers of coats and we got that loan closed with a little bit of elbow grease. Roofs, if it's leaking, or if there's missing shingles and it's in disrepair, oftentimes that's going to have to be done closed before closing or get an escrow holdback. Heating, for whatever reason in Florida, we care about heat. We don't care about air conditioning. How does that make sense? I don't know. But we got to make sure that there's an active heat source. And the high voltage electric lines, if they're too close to the property, sometimes that is a deal killer on that. But those are things that we talk about ahead of time before we go under contract. So when the listing agent asks, I don't know if it's going to pass VA, what are your concerns? And I ask about chip paint. I ask about how's the roof. And the roof is not FHA. FHA requires at least 3 years minimum life of roof. There is no minimum life requirement on the VA. There just can't be any obvious leaks or any missing shingles. Cosmetic repairs. The kitchen is old. It needs new cabinets. It needs new flooring. Razor's not going to care. That's not going to be called out to be fixed before closing. It might affect the value because it's old and ugly, but it's not going to affect the ability to close on that. Yard work. I did have one where a big oak tree, the limb was hanging over the roof. We did have to get that chopped down before closing on that.
That's safety. That's safety.
It's safety. Yeah,
safety.
That thing falls down in a windstorm, and now you have a big repair on that. So for everyone out here, there is a science and an art to getting a VA offer accepted because there's so much misinformation that we're fighting against. And so I have a different approval letter for veterans than I do for conventional buyers. I don't mind tugging on the heartstrings if it's 100% disabled veteran or any disabled veteran. I will pull on those heartstrings, let them know, like to present that to the seller to get them under contract. But then also too, having that 100% close ratio, having that pre-approval letter in your hand knows that a lot of the hard work was done up front, and to overcome those myths ahead of time during the time that the listing was, the offer was presented to the listing agent. The one thing I really want you guys to leave on, if you don't leave with anything, remember those 3 mandatory questions, but also 2, asking if you get a service-related disability, because in the state of Florida, if you're 100% total and permanent, you don't have to pay ad valorem property taxes. You still have to pay the CDDs and water and sewage. That's the not ad valorem taxes. But the big chunk of the bill is the ad valorem. You don't have to if you're 100% total and permanent, or 70% with an unemployment rating. And I've gone through this so many times with my buyers, and also during the refi boom, there was oftentimes it didn't make sense to refinance, but I'm like, you're 100% disabled. Why are you paying property taxes? And to save those buyers those property taxes. And then if you're a surviving spouse, meaning that your spouse was killed in action or because of something that can be tied to the VA, that surviving spouse is exempt from property taxes. And so my $2.2 million VA loan, 100% disabled, that $45,000 property tax bill, zero on that. And so when you have that, the only thing that's really stupid in the state of Florida is that you inherit the seller's tax bill. So on that $2.2 million purchase, you'd have that first in 2023, property taxes are due. 2024, you're homesteaded. You get that waiver from the property appraiser, and there's no tax bill in 2024 on there. And on here, we got people dropping off now, right at 1 o'clock. You guys are right on prompt.
Yeah, we told we'd stick with an hour, but we're talkers. We talk to, so
for the realtors on here, if you tell people to get approved conventional and then just refinance in the VA, let's loan officers on here that call, let's please stop that right now, because if you have a VA right now in this high interest rate environment and you close the VA loan, it is so easy and less expensive to refinance, because all you really need is just proof that you paid your payment on time and you get a credit score, and boom, interest rate refinancing loan. It's only 0.5% for the funding fee, and you have to wait 210 days. But on a cash out, it's 3.3% on it. And if your loan to value is above 90%, there's additional lender hits on there where your rate's going to be a lot higher and your loan amount's going to be a lot more. And you got to pay for an appraisal, and you have to get your income verified, and the property has to be re-underwritten. It's very cash out refinance is just as stringent, if not more, as a purchase compared to an interest rate reduction refinance loan.
So John, I have a question. Is there such thing as a rate and term VA refinance loan?
I mean,
trick
if
question.
someone wants to call it that,
they're all called cash outs.
Called an URL.
Yeah, they're all called cash outs. So like John said, if a veteran is exempt and they can waive their funding fee, the cash out refi may not be very expensive. But I've seen so many realtors telling borrowers, just close that conventional and then you can take your VA later. And that veteran turns around and finds out, hey, I'm using my VA for the second time. I'm trying to do this refinance, and there's this huge over 3% funding fee, like $10,000 being rolled into my loan. Guess which realtor that veteran is never referring or working with again? I hate to say it like this, but it's true. I mean, if you at least give the vets the ability to make an informed choice and explain to them, hey, you can get this offer through conventional, maybe you have a better chance because you're not working with John Howard. But if you go to refinance, it's going to be more expensive. Maybe you should call somebody that can help you get this VA offer accepted, because this is going to help you build wealth a lot better long term.
Yes. And so for the realtors that are still on this call, the MRP certification is a pretty easy certification to do. It's something that just shows, like, when I was a financial planner, like getting the CFP letters after my name, just to show that I'm smart, to get little letters after the name. The MRP is a good course. You'll learn quite a bit, but stay tuned, because the VMA is coming out with the VHA designation here shortly, where it's a 20-hour course, self-paced study. And that will be soon to be, like, if you want a referral from someone from the VMA, you better be VHA on there, because I do a lot of marketing direct to consumer for the sole purpose of finding buyers that don't have a realtor to refer them to my realtor partners. I want to try to recreate some of what the big box lenders are doing, and I want to make sure that our realtor partners are committed to learning about the VA to better serve our veteran clients on that.